I don't really care what you say, Mick. I do think WannaCry was a bigger deal than SolarWinds.
I don't. I really don't.
No,
and that's
ransomware.
because I know you enjoy North Korean more than anything else.
It is my favorite cuisine, gruel and sadness.
I can tell by the bot scenarios earlier on that were North Korean based. It was really a cuisine tribute for you.
Taedong, ATP, forever faithful.
Forever faithful. Well, hey folks, welcome to a late night edition, I guess if you're on the East Coast, of a kind of coffee talk variation. We're doing a panel tonight for the Bluenomicon book that the Surge team released back at RSA. And with me tonight, I have got Jason Lee, CISO for Splunk, Ryan Kovar, Distinguished Security Strategist, Sydney Howard, who is Threat Hunter extraordinaire, and Paul Kurtz. And if you haven't heard of Paul Kurtz, wow, you read the book. So let's get right into it. So thanks for coming out, everyone. The first question, and this is a big question I'm asking everyone because I've been requested to get video footage of it. Why is contributing to a book like Bluenomicon important? So I want to start with Paul and we'll work our way back.
Yeah, when I think about it, there's so many people out there that kind of want to understand people's journeys, their experiences. And I think it's really important to get the word out and make it accessible. So I was happy to be part of this whole project, just because it's creating a narrative, telling a story, and giving people more context about how events unfold. And not to give away the story, but
you do understand your stories are different than most people's stories, right?
I guess they're a little bit different. Yeah.
So Sydney, how about you?
So honestly, I was very honored to be asked to be a part of this and contribute a story. My story is a little more on the technical side. For those who haven't read it yet, it's on threat hunting. It's a little bit more beginner threat hunting, but I think it's really important just to have all these authors together, and I love the fact that we took people in the industry, just all different types of individuals. Some people were, are in leadership. Some people are boots on the ground, say more like me. And it really provides us inspiration for a lot of folks to go out there and tackle security, reading about all of our experiences.
For me, what was important was having something to do. We have a research team. We're expected to publish things. It seemed like we get a lot done with a single book. But really, Mick and I were talking. There's a gentleman at Splunk, James Young, and a lot of it was around how do we encapsulate. There's a great white paper about an anthropologist who studied a security operations center, a SOC. And one of the things he talks about is the tribal knowledge that happens in the security community and how hard it is to pass that on. And during COVID, one of the things I really noticed was the hallway conference talks, the discussions in the restaurant, the late night old fashions or virgin mojitos were not happening, and part of that culture was lost. And we were thinking about how do we continue that tradition via the written form, and that's kind of where Bluenomicon was born, and we wanted to reach out and find people who did interesting things who not everyone could talk to at all the conferences or intimate settings, and that's why we did it.
All right, I was really like a last-minute addition on this, so I came in
Jason,
really
it's not
hot
like you were
and quick.
hired partway through and you had a title. No, you're more than that. You're more than a title. You're a person too.
It was fantastic. I really loved the opportunity to be able to put that in there, and really I wanted to focus in on leadership and how to build relationships. That's just part of the job. Is just when you're constantly going through and getting into the technical work, there's kind of the soft side of things, and I really enjoyed going into that and being able to share from a career perspective how to do that growth, and kind of what I've seen is an easier path on building great relationships and community.
Also, you understand your stories are not normal stories. So building on your essay, I want to talk about that. You are the cyber Dale Carnegie, and a tribute to him. You discussed leadership and influence. And Paul, your career spans decades, agencies, departments. You have.
Call him old?
Yes, and you call me old back. It's fine. You have walked the walk that we all talk about. You have seen the things when they happened. Your career has spanned public sector into private. And what has been the most common trait in leadership, successful leaders that you've seen? Because you have seen both sides of that.
Yeah, absolutely. A good leader is an excellent listener. and willing to let people get their ideas on the table, fuse them together with other ideas from that part of the organization. But it's also, a good leader is, is also being able to tap the brakes. But tap the brakes in such a way that it doesn't destroy the confidence of those that are working with you. Nobody likes to be yelled at, and I just think if you're a good listener and you're giving good guidance, you succeed and you build a good organization. Like in the context of building TrueStar, Patrick and I, we worked together very closely, but we assembled a team and we listened to everybody. Everybody had a role, and it was wonderful to see in the White House context. That gets bureaucratic, so there's a little more fiefdoms to deal with.
It's a different kind of office politics.
But nonetheless, the principle still applies. I would, when I was on the NSC, I really made it a priority to connect with the agencies, to get to know people, to understand where they are coming from. So when you really needed something to get done, it would get done.
And Ryan, what about, you are the leader of Surge. We have a team that spans several continents, and your leadership has seen the team grow pretty drastically, or dramatically in about 6 months, 9 months. Yeah. We've really jumped in front of a lot of things. Do Paul's words ring true to you? That's you listening. You're a great listener, not just because you're my boss, but you're a great friend.
It does. One of the things I learned very early in my career, and one advantage actually that Mick and I both had, was in the US Navy, you're given hundreds of hours of leadership training. And one of the things we went through on that was, one of which is listen to people when they're having problems, have empathy when they're having problems, and the third is make sure they're not left on shore when the ship departs. 2 of those are still very applicable, and we kind of go through that quite a bit. The other thing I learned that I believe is really important for a leader is to give people the ability to do their own tasks, their own way they wish, give a deliverable, give a timeline, and then step back and say, come to me when you have a problem or if you need assistance, but otherwise how you choose to complete is what you're doing. And I think that works really well in cyber, how you choose to do analysis, how you choose to do a SOAR playbook, how you choose to write a Bluenomicon book, and which colors you select are really up to you.
Really, now hearing that, I'm like, you know what, he did it. All right, man, good luck. That's all right. I understand the deadline now. I was like, all right, I'll see you in February, or not. So,
and can I jump in on that for a second? So, for me, leadership doesn't necessarily mean you're a manager. Everybody thinks okay, you're a manager and you're a leader. To me, I always tell this one story. My team's heard it a ton of times. It's when I bring somebody into the team, it's like, okay, so I pay you for 10 donuts. If you make 10 donuts next year, okay, why should I pay you any more? If you make 20 donuts, fantastic. But if you teach 20 other people how to make 20 donuts, that's leadership. You're empowering and teaching and mentoring and growing others. Really think that rings true, and it's something that I really enjoy, and I always bring it up. Sydney's laughing, so she's heard it before.
That exponential growth is huge, yeah.
So, Sydney,
I'm just worried about the health of our internal security team and
diabetes.
I could use
a little help.
We stopped doing hunting threats, now we hunt sprinkles.
That's right.
Well, because we know some of the security teams, I'm afraid chili will be introduced to these donuts, and that will not be good. Right. What's up, Tony?
Cover Tony's ears.
Yeah.
So, Sydney, the ever-changing technical landscape pretty much dictates you have to stay sharp.
Yep.
If you're not learning, you're losing every day. It just feels like you're falling behind. Your essay on Lawbin, specifically for Mac, is I would say not recent, but it's a relatively new attack vector that we've seen.
Yeah.
So what tips outside of your essay would you recommend to operators? How do you stay sharp?
I think just keeping up on what's going on in the cyber threat landscape. So whether that be reading some sort of social media like Twitter or something similar, or just keeping up on, I am avid subscriber to email digest. So
Those those are around?
they are
Wow.
Tech and Engineering Weekly, and
Do you use Eudora as your email client, or are you a Pine gal?
and This Is Forensics are like my two favorite. It's basically just a roundup of what happened in the last week. I don't have the time to sit on the social media platform and monitor all the tweets and see what's coming in and what's new. So really, that really helps me, and also just networking with people. In your industry, like I have friends that I've worked with in the past or people at Splunk that we're just constantly sharing what's going on in the community. That's really probably the best way to stay really sharp.
Paul, your essay, and anyone out there, I would honestly skip the entire book and just read Paul's one. It just blew me away. Your career to me is one of the people I've always looked up to. Your essay centered around like an aha moment.
Yeah.
In your career, like when you're like, hey, I work in cyber now. I'm a cybersecurity professional, and yours was, all right, no, that was happened. Sydney, has that moment happened for you? Are you like, oh, I work in cyber? Because we all know imposter syndrome is a very big thing. And I think that kind of stays with you a little bit, but have you had that I am a cybersecurity professional moment?
I think I've had it probably early in my career. I was trying to think about this, but early in my career, not as cool as the White House, but I was working over the weekend. I was actually on call, and I got an incident from it's like a snort rule, and I was investigating. I luckily got a PCAP, and I thought it was a web shell, but I wasn't quite sure, and so I dug a little bit more into it, and I was like, this looks bad. This is on an externally facing web server. I need to escalate this, and I did. And it turned out to be a huge ordeal, and I got a ton of kudos for it. So it was really big for me. It gave me a lot of confidence and encouragement, because at that time I barely knew what a VPN was. Still very much in the learning phase.
But I would say, you're one of the best threat hunters, and I'm not going to say the word out there. So, but you constantly stay sharp and stay sharpen those skills. How do you not lose sight of that motivation? Like you're saying you're in learning mode. But you're always in learning mode, wouldn't you? That's your whole career until you become like the rest of us and don't have real jobs and just talk about when we did. Like so, staying sharp technically, how does that translate? Like we don't have to stay as sharp technically in our roles, right? Jason, you do, but from a different perspective than Sydney, right?
I like to say I can once in a while spell security. Woo! That works well,
Remember, no X.
That's right. That's right.
Perhaps you didn't go to RSA conference. So how you're staying like ahead of the news. So on Surge, our perspective is different. So I guess behind the people part, like people connection's always there.
Yep.
Staying current on things. How does that lens shift for you as the CISO of Splunk? Like you're not learning like the technical details of say a SolarWinds or I guess WannaCry, but you better know the ins and outs, the details, right?
Believe it or not, I am on some email lists, so shout out to Sydney.
So fun.
So I still keep up with that. Once in a while, I'll ask the team, but I love learning from my team. I love listening and learning, and I'm just into constant always want to understand what they're doing, what are the kind of new techniques going out there. So I still want to understand it. I really am a technologist at heart. I've got like a 3D printer behind me at home. Everybody gives me a hard time for that, but I just constantly learn and love doing that.
What was that aha moment for you?
Yeah, so I'm going to totally date myself, but back in the day, I actually started as an IT auditor. I worked for an accounting firm, and this new sort of thing was like, why don't we start auditing the IT systems? And so I started actually learning about a little bit about SQL injection, things like that, and hired at Microsoft as an IT auditor, and then lo and behold, they created a security team there. And they're like, Jason, I think you need to come over here. And I was like, oh crap, I do know security. And so I had a lot of imposter syndrome. I'm like, I'm just like this auditor person. I'm just like trying to find these issues. But then kind of, they kept me, and I ended up staying for about 15 years, but it was really like after like the second or third job, I'm like, I think I got this, and I actually love this. Like, this is great. I love solving things and finding things.
So Ryan, what about you and not the Pie Factory?
That's a longer story. For me, I think It's interesting when you say cybersecurity. It's a very, there's some people in the audience who are going to say, no, it's infosec. Others say cyber. I look at it as both. So for me, I think I started as a system administrator who moved into auditing and regulatory and compliance, and that was very information security for me. And then I kind of fell into what I consider to be cybersecurity, and I was working an incident with an Iranian threat actor, and I suddenly realized I knew where he lived, I knew what his children's names were, I had figured out all this stuff, I had mapped out his calendar because he was doing this stuff around, I'm like, okay, well this is this holiday, so he's probably not, and suddenly I'm like, oh crap, I do this for a living. What do I do again? This is awesome.
That's
and
not cyber, that's counterintelligence,
yeah,
you know that, right? Just to be clear.
Anyway, we had a great holiday in Dubai, we talked, we ate, we drank, it was great, but it was just one of those, this is a really great job, what I get to do is really awesome, and I want to do more.
Yep.
Can I just jump in on the terms like cybersecurity?
Because you were there the day it was coined, right?
I was recalling, I worked on the first national strategy to build to secure cyberspace, and we were having this debate at the White House as to would it be called a cybersecurity strategy. And at that time, Bush was president, and there was this debate, it's like, well, is anybody going to really understand what cyber means? And it shouldn't it be information security? And it went all the way to chief of staff as to what this thing was going to be called. But ultimately, we did kind of went with the national strategy to secure cyberspace. We didn't get cybersecurity per se, but we got cyberspace. And it was just a really unique, bizarre experience. I'm happy, we at least got cyber in the title.
And you avoided information superhighway.
Yes.
So
yes.
you got that going for it.
And you didn't hyphenate it, so.
Yeah. That's where our tax dollars at work.
Yeah, we saved a hyphen. Billions of dollars saved in printed hyphens.
So we talk about community often. We've heard the people aspect of it. One of the things I've heard a lot over our time here at Conf, it's that listen, learn, adapt to all the things. And that we were constantly listening, we're constantly learning. We talk about community, whether it's you came from the InfoSec scene, like the hacker culture, whether you came from just the industry, or whether you grew up in the DC cyber tribe, as we colloquially call it. What does community mean to you in the cybersecurity sense, or the information security sense? I don't want to be pedantic, but it is InfoSec. And how has that definition changed as your career has changed? So I'll start with Ryan, because we've known each other about a super long time.
I think the interesting thing for me is as my peers have all gotten older and more gray and fat, unlike me, who's still a perfect Adonis of a man.
Are you saying something about me?
No, we're not you. No, but Mick.
Yes, I am the one that's let go, not you.
It's been fascinating watching my friends and peers change their careers from I'm an incredible IC to I'm a leader to why don't we do this? This is the most important thing in the world, to going, yeah, that sucks, but we're not going to do anything about it. It's more important for the business to be running than you have perfect security. And that's been a fascinating journey. I mean, I went through it myself, but it's a community of people, and we're working together still. I'm still learning from my peers, but now we're also able to go down as the community grows and we introduce new people to it. We're also able to have this conversation of uplifting other people, and now they can ignore us like I once ignored other people. So that's great too. But it's the community is still there. It's very important to me. It's important to bring people in through it, and also I've shared that community for 10, 20 years of my career. And it's wonderful.
Sydney, how about you?
I think my idea of community, especially in terms of security, has changed quite a bit over time. In the beginning of my career, I did not really understand the concept of it or the fact that I needed that. I just did my job, went home. I didn't really jump into any of the communities. I think in my previous role is really when that changed. I met some people that really inspired me and were really supportive. They were like my hype squad in the corner that was really encouraging me and sharing all the cool things they were doing and made me want to do more. So I think really having that encouragement and that support from all the people in your network that you're constantly networking with, and keeping the networking up as the years go, is really important in how you keep that community and keep it growing and keep it a big part of your life.
What about you, Paul?
I'm struggling with this one a little bit because, because I was in the government for a while, and my community was the government. It was the national.
You know who you're
security
talking to,
space.
right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I am not unfamiliar.
Yeah, and then you go from government to, like, I started a trade association focused on cybersecurity, and that was like working with Capitol Hill. And that's a totally different, it's associated with government, but it's a totally different game. But I was working with tech vendors, security vendors at the time, so that was a community. And then, and then in the context of working overseas, working with organizations like the IAEA on nuke issues, or working in the context of doing a startup, they're all, when Patrick and I started TrueStar, the introduction to the VC community and playing, how do you meet the right folks in the VC community? How do you get that funding? And then how do you go sell the product? And
Right.
how do you find your way in the market? So all these, it's not one community. So I feel really blessed that I've had the opportunity to step through a whole bunch of different communities and have different challenges throughout my career.
I feel similar in that vein. Like my career is fairly similar to yours. I spent most of it in the public sector. My last federal role at the White House, and then becoming the CISO for the Buttigieg campaign. It's a wild shift, and then coming here to Splunk, you have that government community, the individual computers, all the folks in the intelligence community, the other IC, and that's pretty much all you hang out with. And then in the DEF CON community, I've been going to DEF CON for a super long time, and that's a completely different community there. And I also teach lockpicking, and that third intersection is just a different community, and I think all of those are super valuable. I know you, when you were first starting off as IT auditor, like there wasn't a CISO Slack then, right?
No. I was going to say, like, there were two really communities that were important to me. I'd say I was early on, I call it, I was demoted to a manager. So I was made a people manager. I wasn't good enough to be an IC. So I really glommed on to kind of really management excellence, and kind of like what Sydney said, is I looked for mentors, finding, and I really, we called it the mothership. I was at Microsoft. I really grew up there for like 15 years. And so I was really, my community at that time was just how to become a better people manager and help my team to succeed more. And my principle now is my main job as a CISO is just to increase the value of everybody on my team. I want their resumes better working under me. I want them all worth more money, and they're worth more for Splunk. And then now you alluded to is there's a CISO community out there, and yes, there is multiple Slack channels, but there's a lot of good interaction there. We help each other. It's there really isn't when you work for a CIO, you work for a chief legal officer.
It used to be you're on an island.
Right. That's right.
Like the CISO of the Buttigieg campaign, you're the only CISO ever, and so hey, what?
Who can you
Just
talk
me,
to? You're
right.
like,
So I think communities like that are
that's
valuable.
right.
And again, I think it's changed over time, right? It's you never lose sight of all the communities you've been a part of, but I think the communities you participate in shift slightly. But apparently, email lists.
Where's that?
That is.
I mean, I thought we were
That's
going to
right.
talk about IRC when we went into community.
No,
Still a thing. They're just coming back around.
it's all right.
So we're running out of time, so I want to kind of wrap it. I want to give you guys a last question. What would you write in volume 2, Jason?
Again, kind of to the theme that I would talk about is I would love to be able to talk about all the pitfalls of what not to do to go through your career to get to a CISO, to say like, here's what I've learned, what I did wrong. I would love to be able to kind of help and empower others about how to find your community and how to grow and really manage your own career. Like, I really don't think it's your boss's job to help you get promoted or to help you get other jobs. It's really, you got to take that yourself, and I have a lot of passion about that space, so I'd really love to be able to do that kind of theme in the book.
All right, well, we'll come get you some money from you to fund it later. Just,
All right,
Ryan,
we'll
I'll
keep
come
talking.
knocking. Ryan, what about you? You wrote the afterword. I mean, the
Yeah.
forward. I wrote the afterword. Sorry.
I guess we could swap. I'd probably write the story of the Pie Factory when I went and did a.
You could
an
just tell
audit.
the story of the Pie
Okay.
Factory now. I think everyone wants to hear it.
So we did an audit. This is years before Splunk, but we did an audit of an organization that was a grocer, and they had a large pie factory center. And at some point during the audit, I was talking to them, and I noticed they had a Class A network Visio diagram on the wall, and I thought that was really odd. You don't see like populated Class A networks very often. kind of stuck in my head. And at one point we were going through, I was like, how do you deal with pen tests? Do you do this? He's like, we do, but they're not allowed to scan the Pi factory. And I laughed, like, oh, what's that a euphemism for? He's like, no, you don't scan the Pi factory. I said, oh, okay, you don't scan the Pi factory. He's like, no, you do not scan the Pi factory. I said, okay, we don't scan the Pi. Why don't we scan? He's open, pulls down volume 3, page 365, paragraph 4A of his documentation. He said, you will not scan the Pi factory due to a vulnerability of UDP. I said, well, what's that mean? He's like, well, one day we had a pen tester in, and they did an Nmap scan very aggressively, and it went across the VPN, and it went into our Pi factory, and it flipped over the sensors that did the baking of the pies, and it caused them to go from 375 to 875, and it burned all the pies, and so we don't scan the Pi factory. Oh, cool, that's really reasonable. Like, what mitigating, what did you learn from that? What were your mitigations? And he said, we put it in the documentation, not to scan the Pi factory. I said, okay.
That's risk accepted.
That's done. Yeah, risk accepted.
Risk accepted.
No
Pies
need.
are important.
Pies are important. Yeah, pies are critical infrastructure.
See what I just
Exactly,
did? Now he
exactly.
can't write that story in volume 2. He has to do something
That's
else.
right. That's good.
Sydney, how about you?
So
What threat are we going to deal with in about a year and a half?
And what type of pastry is it?
if it's a pastry, it's probably like a chocolate cake or something.
I think we're hungry. Donuts, pies, cakes, yeah.
You
But
know it.
as far as another essay, I would say probably something on threat hunting again, but a little bit more advanced. One of the areas that I'm exploring right now that I know you talked about in the keynote is model-assisted threat hunting, so using machine learning and applying it to threat hunting. That's an area I really want to explore, and I think there's not a lot out there on getting into it, like the very intro of it, like how do I get it specifically set up what I need to really get there. And I think it's really important because something like adding machine learning to your threat hunting can really just secure or mature your threat hunting organization like super quickly, provide a lot of value.
Paul, what would you write for us again?
I'm struggling on this one too, but
Because you have a million stories.
I think I'm spending a lot of time just looking at AI and
I think you and
everyone. And so I get kind of say, oh yeah, maybe I write something in AI, but I'm like, okay, what am I going to say? Am I going to really add value now? And I think the answer is probably no. It's probably not the right thing to do. What I would like to do is I've been toying with the idea of trying to write a fictional piece that would account for what could happen over the next 5 to 10 years, and how could AI, so to speak, play out. There's a lot of great books out there on AI, like AI 2041. It's one of my favorites. And just kind of toying with that of like looking at, here's a story, but here's the technology behind it. I think it's a really interesting approach.
I think we also just learned we're going to have to fact check his AI hallucination essay upon submission. That's what I'm learning here.
It'll be our fanfic section of Bluenomicon too. Well, that's all the time we've got today. We can sit and rap for a bit. I do have so many more questions about the Pi factory. But I think, so the reason I kind of put Bluenomicon together is this thing called Seiki. It's a model by 2 Japanese researchers. There's something coming out next month that I wrote to it. The idea of tacit and explicit knowledge. So tacit knowledge is that on-the-job training, things you pick up, you never write down. And it's not that we don't write things down, it's that we don't write things down. And the other part of that is explicit knowledge, the things we do write down. So all the things you learn, some of the things, Paul, you talked about, Ryan, you talked about in your essays, are now codified. So someone's going to read that with the things they've picked up, all in their tacit knowledge, and will create more explicit knowledge. So that's the idea behind Bluenomicon and Bluenomicon again, if we do a volume 2, and we're probably going to do a volume 2. The idea of tacit knowledge, what would you say has been the tippiest tip that you've learned in your career that's not cyber related, not leadership related, just like for me, when I was working at the White House, I learned that when you go on the plane, everyone has a suit on, but when they get on the plane, everyone puts their sweatpants on. And no one mentioned that, so I'm on a flight to Israel, like in a suit, just sitting on the sidewall. So, like, are there any tips that you have in that vein?
Let's see here. I would say, for me, when I talk about moving around in jobs, one of the things that a lot of people do is you look for something that you fit all the requirements, and that should never be the case. I think it's like hardly anybody actually meets 100% of all the requirements in there. But some people that are very good have this mental block of like, oh, I don't meet this, so I'm not going to apply. And I think that just limits people. And it's like, everybody that applies doesn't meet 100% of everything. And so really, that was one thing that I had to learn early on. And I just think that's just good general advice, is to look for something especially that makes you uncomfortable. Like that's even better. If there's something that
I think the kids call that shooting your shot, or
Sure.
maybe they did like 4 or 5 years ago. I'm not 100% sure.
300 years ago, I think Hamilton. I'm
fair,
unclear about
fair.
that documentary. It was very confusing.
What about you?
Gosh, now I feel like we should have prepared for this one. For me, I think it actually was in vain. One of my mentors, former president of revenue at Splunk, Susan St. Ledger, she used to say, it's not a career ladder, it's a career puddle. And by that she meant you fill up buckets. You shouldn't think of your career as just a horizontal climb, but rather you should think about where do you generally want to go and what are the buckets you have to fill in your skills to be able to accomplish that. So if you're looking at becoming a threat hunter, do you know statistics? Like, do you understand adversaries? Do you know this? If you're looking at becoming a people leader, do you understand what motivates people? Do you understand the difference? You know, one of the lines that you said, which I love, is people come to me often and say, I want to be a manager. And I say, why? It's a horrible, horrible job. And they go, no, I want to be a leader. And I was like, well, those are not the same things.
Those are different
Some of
things.
the best leaders
Yes.
I've ever met are individual contributors,
That's
and
right.
some of the worst leaders I've ever met are managers. So like, when you say you want to go into a leadership position, what do you actually mean? And then how are you going to accomplish that? Like, what skills do you need to grow to do that? Because you can do a lot of leadership as a team lead or as an IC leading a project. So I kind of go back to the buckets of what are you trying to do, and stop thinking of it as a climb, but rather as a journey.
So mine is going to be really tactical and very simple. Document all the things, whether it is your working tickets, document it all for later, share all that knowledge out with people, whether it be for processes, document it all. It's only going to help later down the road when you're in a crisis and you need to look at things, or even in your career. Like, create a brag sheet of what you're working on. Make sure you update it weekly, maybe even monthly, quarterly, like whatever works for you. That's only going to help when it comes to review time or when you're trying to get that promotion.
What about you, Paul? Like, I know there's a million things.
Well, I think it's reading. I spend a lot of time reading. I try to allot at least an hour or so a day to read, and it's not reading just cyber stuff. Yeah, I read, got to keep up on it, but I read
policy documents now, and like,
I'm sorry.
Sounds
but,
riveting.
it's not
They
at
actually
all.
are.
Well,
I
like,
disagree.
hey,
Yeah.
there's a new cyber policy rolling out. I feel like I should kind of know the details of it. And operator Mick would have no. What are you doing? Like, you don't read that. That's boring. And because it's documented, we have the anti-documentation clause in our reading.
So you're saying you're following all the policies at work then? You've read all the security policies and you're on it?
We recite
Not
the UAP
yours.
every day before our team meeting.
Good.
I do. I
Yeah,
just
we-
recite it.
I read them before bed,
Yeah.
then I fall asleep.
Do the Pledge of Jason. It's before every.
Something, use USBs.
It's fun when you read things that, like say Michael Lewis's Moneyball, and one of my favorite books. And lots of times when I read books, I find it gives me an idea that I hadn't thought of previously that could be applied to cyberspace. In the Moneyball, it was all about the data. How would you put together a baseball team that is not based on just the scouts that are out there trying to pick out the right baseball player? It's like, how do we look at the stats? What are the right stats? How do you put that data together and come up with a great baseball team? And it changed the game of baseball. And when I look at cyberspace and cybersecurity, it's all about the data. It's making sure you know what you know, and you can work the analytics in many different ways to try to get the best insight possible. So if you read outside your field, sometimes it helps you explain to others what we're really trying to do.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's all the time we've got for our panel. We're going to wrap this up so we can move on to a very special interview with Jake Williams. But I want to thank all of you for coming on the panel tonight. It it has been a privilege to sit next to all of you and talk about the book we wrote together. So I'm really excited about it. I really hope everyone out there watching and that has a copy has gotten value out of it. And if you have, email Jason and let him know so he'll pay for us to do it again. I think that's the
Preferably
overall
send it in
plan.
a PDF or a USB drive.
It has
straight
to
the
come in
Splunk
an
office.
email list first
Yes.
for me to be able to see it.
That's your DDR.
That's right.
But we have some copies here at Conf. There is a digital version we're releasing, so be sure to be on the lookout for that. And thanks for watching.